Emery Ross hadn't planned on chasing a screaming kid through Central Park on a Tuesday afternoon. But here he was, mud on his jeans, his worn-out sneakers smacking against the gravel path, and his 5-year-old daughter's half-eaten sandwich still in his hand. Hey, slow down, kid," he called out. The little boy, no older than 5, darted through a group of joggers and skidded to a stop near the duck pond. Tears streaked down his flushed cheeks, and his chest heaved with panicked breaths. Emery crouched beside him, hands up like he was calming a wild animal. Hey, you okay? Where's your mom or dad?" The boy sniffled, pointing toward the street. "I don't know. I was holding her hand, and then she was gone." Emery's heart clenched. "What's your name?" "Sawyer," the boy whispered, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "All right, Sawyer, I'm Emery. I've got a daughter too. Her name's Sadie. She's probably sitting on the bench right now wondering where her dad ran off to." He offered a small smile. "Let's go find your mom together, okay?" Sawyer nodded, sniffling again. Emery glanced toward the path he'd come from. Sadie was there, sitting with her backpack and hugging her knees, watching him with wide eyes. She was used to him helping strangers. He gave her a quick wave and mouthed, "It's okay." He took Sawyer's hand and walked toward the park gates, scanning for anyone who looked like they were losing their mind over a missing kid. "Mom has really long hair," Sawyer murmured. "She smells like flowers. She was wearing a white dress." "Okay, long hair, flowers, white dress," Emery repeated, eyes flicking across the street. Then he saw her. She was standing near a black SUV, her heels clicking against the pavement, panic carved into every line of her face. Her hair was dark and loose around her shoulders, and she was spinning in circles, calling out. "Sawyer," she screamed, her voice cracked. "Sawyer." The boy's face lit up. "Mommy." He let go of Emery's hand and bolted across the street. Emery followed close behind, making sure cars stopped before they crossed. The woman dropped to her knees as Sawyer flew into her arms. She held him close, burying her face in his shoulder. "Oh my God," she whispered over and over, rocking him. You scared me, baby." Emery stopped a few feet away, catching his breath. She looked up, eyes bright with tears. "Did you find him?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Yes," Emery said, rubbing the back of his neck. "He was by the pond, said he lost your hand." She stood slowly, still holding Sawyer tight, and stepped closer. "Thank you, seriously, thank you." He gave a small nod. "No problem, just glad I saw him before he got farther." She glanced down at her son, then back at Emery. "I'm Naomi Teller." "Emery Ross," he replied, "and that's my daughter over there." He gestured toward Sadie, who was now cautiously walking over, clutching her stuffed bunny. Naomi's eyes softened. "She's beautiful." "Thanks, she's the boss," he chuckled. "Can I give you something? A reward or—" "No," he cut in, shaking his head. "Don't need anything, just happy your little guy is safe." She stared at him for a beat, her brows pulling together like she didn't know what to do with that answer. Like she wasn't used to people not asking for something. Instead, she said, "Well, let me at least buy you and Sadie dinner. It's the least I can do." Emery hesitated. "That's not necessary." "I insist," she said firmly. "And if you don't come, I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life." Emery looked down at Sadie, who gave a hopeful shrug like, "Why not?" He sighed, "All right, but only because she loves pasta." Naomi smiled, warm, real, and a little relieved. "Then pasta it is." The restaurant Naomi took them to wasn't just any place, it was one of those places with gold-rimmed menus and waiters in tuxedos. Emery felt instantly out of place in his faded hoodie and jeans, but Naomi didn't even blink. They were escorted to a private table near a window overlooking the city. Emery pulled out Sadie's chair, then sat down slowly, trying not to knock over any of the glasses. Naomi ordered wine. Emery asked for water. Sadie got orange juice and spaghetti the size of her head. "So," Naomi said after a moment, resting her chin on her hand, "what do you do, Emery?" He laughed under his breath. "Currently, whatever it can, construction jobs, deliveries, handyman stuff. I was laid off 6 months ago. Been figuring things out since." Naomi's gaze flickered. "And Sadie's mom?" "Gone," he said simply. "Left when Sadie was 3, no contact since." She nodded slowly, like she understood more than she said. "That's a lot." "Yes, but we get by." Naomi leaned back, watching him. "You didn't even hesitate when you saw Sawyer. You just helped." Emery shrugged. "Wouldn't you?" She was silent for a beat. Most people wouldn't. He didn't know what to say to that, so he focused on cutting up Sadie's spaghetti. Naomi turned to Sadie. "How's school?" Sadie lit up. "I like art and music, and I can spell my name. Wanna hear?" Naomi smiled. "Definitely." As Sadie started spelling, Emery watched Naomi laugh, really laugh, for the first time that night. He noticed the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, how she leaned in when someone talked, and how she didn't act like someone who probably paid more for her shoes than he had in his bank account. They stayed at the restaurant longer than they expected. Dessert came, then coffee, then more talking. When it was finally time to leave, Naomi stood and said, "Let me give you a ride." Emery opened his mouth to refuse, but Sadie yawned and leaned against his leg, and honestly, the subway sounded like hell right now. "Sure," he muttered, "thanks." The SUV was sleek, black, and driven by a man in a suit who greeted Naomi as Ms. Teller. Emery blinked. "You have a driver." Naomi smiled lightly. "Comes with the job." "What job is that?" She hesitated. "I run a company, tech stuff. My dad started it. I took over when I was 28. She didn't say the name, but Emery recognized it. Everyone knew Teller Tech. "You're that Naomi Teller." She gave him a sheepish look. "Guilty." Emery stared out the window, processing. He just had dinner with a billionaire. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like someone who didn't belong. He glanced at Naomi, who was adjusting Sawyer's seatbelt, her hair falling over her shoulder as she laughed at something he said. She caught Emery watching. "What?" He shook his head. "Nothing, just thanks for dinner." Naomi looked at him, something unreadable behind her eyes. "Thank you for finding my son." The next morning, Emery stood in the cramped kitchen of his apartment, flipping pancakes that were more burnt than golden. Sadie sat cross-legged at the table, coloring a paper crown with the stub of a purple crayon. There was a faint drip from the faucet, and the neighbor's stereo thumped through the thin walls, but Emery's mind was still stuck on last night. Not the food, not the driver. Not even the fact that he had sat across from a woman whose company name was probably printed on half the phones in the city. No, it was her voice when she'd spoken to Sadie, the way she'd leaned in like every word mattered. It was how she'd looked at him not like he was a charity case, not like he was something pitiful, but like she was curious. Like she saw something she didn't expect. Sadie tapped her spoon against the table. "Daddy, can I bring my bunny to the shop?" "You can bring her, but she's not fixing plumbing again," he said, flipping a pancake that landed with a splat. "Last time she nearly clogged the sink." Sadie giggled and hugged the stuffed rabbit to her chest. Emery hadn't planned to work today. His part-time job at the hardware store gave him Wednesdays off, and he usually used the day to pick up side gigs. He was considering calling a guy who needed help moving furniture when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at it for a second, then answered. "Hello." "Emery," Naomi's voice was unmistakable. Calm but direct, like she never needed to ask anything twice. Yes, morning. There was a pause. I hope I'm not calling too early. He glanced at the clock. We've been up since 7, pancake day. Ah, good. I wanted to ask you something. He waited, unsure what a woman like her could want from a man like him. I've been thinking about last night, she said carefully, and I realized I could use someone like you. Emery raised an eyebrow. Like me. I need someone I can trust. Someone good with their hands who doesn't care about boardrooms or headlines. I've got a few properties that need work. Houses I'm turning into shelters for families. You'd be paid weekly, and it's flexible. He leaned against the counter, the spatula forgotten in his hand. You want to hire me, just like that? No, she said. I want to offer you a job because I trust what I saw. You didn't hesitate with Sawyer. You didn't ask for anything. You just helped. He looked at Sadie, who was now trying to pour syrup without spilling it. What kind of pay are we talking? Fair, she said. More than the hardware store, promise. He hesitated. I'd need to bring Sadie sometimes. I assumed that, Naomi said. There'll be space for her. My assistant can help set up a kid-friendly area. He ran a hand through his hair. All right, I'll try it for a week. Naomi's voice brightened just slightly. Great. I'll have someone send you the address. First site's in Brooklyn. I'll meet you there tomorrow morning. After he hung up, he set his phone down slowly. Who was that? Sadie asked, chewing a bite of pancake. Someone who wants Daddy to fix some houses. Will there be snacks? He laughed, probably. The next morning, Emery dressed in his best work jeans and a clean shirt that only had one hole near the hem. Sadie wore her overalls and carried a backpack stuffed with coloring books and crackers. They arrived at the brownstone just after 9. It was old but solid. Red brick, tall windows, a rusted fence that creaked when he opened it. Naomi stood on the steps, wearing slim black trousers and a blouse tucked neatly at her waist. Her hair was pulled back today, sunglasses perched on her head. You're early, she said with a nod. Habit, he replied. Didn't want to be the guy who shows up late to his fancy new job. Naomi smiled, then knelt down in front of Sadie. Hey, boss, I've got a whole room upstairs with puzzles and crayons. Want to check it out? Sadie looked up at Emery for approval. He nodded. A woman stepped out from the doorway mid-40s, kind eyes, clipboard in hand. This is Lee, Naomi said. She runs the foundation and will help keep an eye on Sadie when she's here. Lee offered Sadie her hand. Wanna help me set up a snack table? Sadie beamed and followed her inside. Emery watched until she disappeared upstairs. You really didn't have to do that, he said. I didn't do it for you, Naomi said lightly. I did it for her. He raised an eyebrow. She's got that look, Naomi added. The one kids get when they spend too much time worrying if their parents okay. He exhaled through his nose. You see a lot, don't you? She tucked her glasses into her bag. I've had practice. The day was spent tearing out old cabinets, fixing warped floorboards, and patching drywall. Naomi didn't hover, but she didn't disappear either. Every so often, she'd appear with 2 coffees in hand, ask a question about the process, or crouch beside Sadie to admire her latest drawing. By late afternoon, Emery was covered in dust and sweat, his back aching, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so useful. As he packed up his tools, Naomi stepped beside him. You're good, she said. Fast, efficient. Thanks, I've had a lot of practice doing things the cheap way. I prefer the smart way, she replied. Fast and cheap usually ends in lawsuits. He chuckled, fair. She hesitated. Do you ever take work outside the city? I have, yeah. Why? One of the shelters is upstate. We're converting an old estate. It's a bigger project, more pay, might be good for you and Sadie to get out of the city. He studied her. You offering me a vacation or a job? She met his eyes, both. He didn't answer right away. The idea of fresh air, a yard for Sadie to run in, maybe even a full kitchen that didn't leak it sounded like a dream. I'll think about it, he said finally. Naomi nodded. I'll send the details, no pressure. Before he could say more, Sadie ran up, her cheeks pink from running. Daddy, I made a friend. Her name's Mia and her mom paints murals. That's amazing, Bug. He scooped her up, ready to go. Can we come back tomorrow? Naomi answered before he could. You're both welcome anytime. As they walked to the train, Emery glanced over his shoulder. Naomi was still standing on the steps, arms folded, watching them go. There was something in her gaze measured, thoughtful, and just a little vulnerable. He turned away before it could mean anything. The estate was nothing short of a Gothic fairy tale if fairy tales came with peeling shutters and cracked stucco. Emery stood at the edge of the gravel driveway, Sadie at his side, both of them staring up at the massive house that loomed like it had secrets to tell if you dared ask the right questions. This place looks like it eats people, Sadie whispered. Only on weekends, Emery replied, nudging her with his elbow. Naomi arrived moments later in a forest green SUV, her hair tucked into a low ponytail, soft wool coat fluttering as she stepped out. She looked out of place against the overgrown hedges and weathered facade, but not in a bad way. More like she had stepped out of a world that didn't belong here and was determined to make it her own. You made good time, she said, approaching them. Did you get lost? Only once, Emery replied, but Sadie used her snack bag as a compass. I used the granola bar to point north, Sadie added proudly. Naomi bent down to fist bump her. Genius. They moved inside, the foyer echoing with every step. Dust hung in the air, thick enough to taste. The place had bones, grand archways, carved banisters, stained glass windows that caught the light in fractured patterns, but it had been forgotten. You plan on turning this into a shelter? Emery asked, adjusting the strap of his tool bag. Yeah, a long-term one, for mothers with kids, somewhere they can stay longer than 90 days, somewhere that feels like a home, not a sentence. He glanced around. You're not thinking small. I never do, she said, her voice even. Sadie was already exploring, trailing fingers along the faded wallpaper, her shoes squeaking on the warped floorboards. Naomi led her to a side room once a library, now filled with boxes of supplies and a few folding chairs. A woman in her 30s with braided hair and a warm expression stood beside a table of toys, waving as they approached. This is Rihanna, Naomi said. She's managing the local crew. Rihanna offered Emery a handshake. Good to finally meet the guy Naomi's been talking about. Hopefully it was all flattering, he replied. Oh no, Rihanna said, grinning. She only hires people she plans to boss around. Emery chuckled, but when he looked at Naomi, he caught something else, a flicker of something heavier, something she wasn't saying. Naomi motioned toward the hallway. Come on, I'll show you the upstairs. They climbed the creaking staircase, sunlight filtering through the cracked windows. In the hallway, Naomi paused in front of a door and pushed it open. This was the master bedroom. I want to convert it into a group therapy space. Big table in the center, maybe some couches. Emery stepped inside, running a hand along the wall. You've got vision. She leaned against the doorframe. I've got urgency. He looked at her. You okay? Naomi hesitated. A woman I knew, Alina, stayed in one of our shelters last year. She had 2 kids, had to leave her husband in the middle of the night. She got help, got back on her feet, but when her 90 days were up, there was nowhere else to go. She ended up back with him. She didn't make it through the winter. Emery swallowed, the weight of her words settling in like dust on his shoulders. "That's why this matters," she said. "Not because it looks good on a report, because not doing it costs lives." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll make sure it's solid, no shortcuts." Naomi's gaze held his, something unspoken pulsing in the silence. Downstairs, Sadie's laughter rang out as Rihanna chased her around the room with a plastic dinosaur. "She's happy here," Emery said. "She should be," Naomi replied. "Kids should get to be kids." They spent the rest of the afternoon measuring beams and inspecting the plumbing. Naomi didn't just observe, she asked questions, took notes, and offered input that made sense. She wasn't just a figurehead slapping her name on a cause. She was in it. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees and painted the estate in soft orange light, Naomi stood beside Emery on the porch, arms crossed against the chill. "You ever think about taking on more full-time work?" she asked. He glanced at her. "You offering something?" "Maybe," she said, her voice careful. "I'm expanding, more projects. I need someone I can trust, someone grounded, not just contractors who bill by the hour and forget the people they're building for." "You sure about me?" he asked. "I'm not polished. I don't network. I barely have a working phone half the time." Naomi turned fully to face him. "You show up. You care. You treat people like they matter. That's more than I can say for half the people on my payroll." He didn't answer, not right away. Instead, he watched as Sadie ran across the grass with Rihanna's dog, her laughter echoing with a kind of freedom he hadn't seen in months. "I'll consider it," he said finally, "but I don't want charity, Naomi." "I don't give charity," she replied. "I make investments." The air shifted between them, quiet but charged. Emery didn't move, didn't step closer, but something in his eyes softened. Naomi cleared her throat. "I'm heading back to the city tonight. There's a benefit tomorrow, some fundraiser my board insisted on hosting." He raised an eyebrow. "Sounds exhausting." "You have no idea," she muttered. Then almost casually, "You should come." He blinked. "What?" "You and Sadie. It's nothing formal, well, okay? It's at a rooftop hotel and there's probably a string quartet, but still. Come." "I don't own anything that fits in at a rooftop hotel with a string quartet." "You don't have to, just be there." He hesitated. "Why?" Naomi looked at him, something vulnerable threading through her expression. "Because I want you to see the other side of my world, and I want them to see you." He studied her for a long moment, then finally said, "All right, but if anyone tries to hand me a tiny crab cake on a napkin, I'm leaving." Naomi laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "Deal." That night, as Emery tucked Sadie into bed in the guest cottage Rihanna had set up for them on the property, he sat on the edge of the mattress and brushed her hair back. "Do you like it here?" he asked. Sadie nodded. "It's big, and there's dogs, and Miss Naomi gave me a sticker book." "Do you think we should stay a while?" She yawned. "Only if we can bring pancakes." He kissed her forehead, then it settled. Emery stepped outside, the night air cool against his skin. He looked up at the estate, its silhouette against the stars, a place once forgotten now slowly coming back to life. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like the guy trying to catch up. He felt like he might already be where he belonged. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Emery stepped into a world made of glass, gold, and glittering skyline. The rooftop ballroom stretched before him in a cathedral of light, every surface polished until it gleamed. Waiters in black vests moved like clockwork, offering trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres balanced on artful napkins. A string quartet played near a marble fountain, notes rising and falling like breath. He adjusted the collar of the charcoal jacket Naomi had sent earlier that day along with a tailor who'd shown up at the guest cottage with a rolling rack and a tape measure. Sadie stood beside him in a navy dress with tiny silver stars stitched into the fabric, her hair in a neat braid Rihanna had done before they left. She clutched a small stuffed bear, her eyes wide as they took in the chandeliers. "Is this a castle?" she whispered. "Feels like one, doesn't it?" Emery said quietly. Naomi found them near the entrance. She wore a floor-length midnight gown with structured shoulders and a subtle train, her earrings catching the light like falling stars. There was power in the way she carried herself tonight, not armor, but presence. The room seemed to make space for her without her needing to ask. "You clean up well," she said, her eyes trailing down his frame with open appreciation. "You sent the clothes," he replied. "I sent options, you pick that one, which means you have taste." Sadie tugged Naomi's hand. "You look like a queen." Naomi crouched to her level. "Then you must be the royal guard." "I'm the boss," Sadie corrected. Naomi stood with a grin. "Of course you are." They moved through the crowd slowly. Naomi introduced him to people, a few board members, some donors, a woman from the mayor's office. Emery gave polite nods and shook hands, but he could feel the weight of their stares. Not hostile, just curious. He knew what they saw, a man who didn't belong in their world, but Naomi never flinched. She stood beside him like he was the only person in the room worth knowing. As they approached the far end of the ballroom, Naomi leaned close. "There's someone I want you to meet." A tall man in his late 50s turned as they approached. His silver hair was slicked back, and his tailored tuxedo looked like it had been pressed that morning by someone with a degree in precision. "Emery, this is Leonard Vance. He runs the advisory board for the foundation." Leonard offered a firm handshake. "Naomi tells me you're the one overseeing the upstate renovation." "I'm doing the work," Emery said, "not overseeing." "You're both. We've seen the progress reports." Leonard studied him a moment longer. "It's good to have someone who understands what these families need. Most people just build boxes and call it generosity." Naomi's voice was quiet but clear. "That's why I wanted him." Leonard nodded slowly, then turned to Sadie. "And who's this?" "I'm Sadie," she said, standing straighter. "I helped pick paint colors." "Well then," Leonard said, "you're clearly the project lead." As he walked away, Naomi turned to Emery. "That went better than expected." "I thought he was going to hand me a resume and ask for references." "He doesn't give compliments easily." Emery glanced around. "So what happens at these things? Speeches, check writing." "Eventually," she said, "but first dancing." He looked alarmed. "I didn't agree to dancing." "Too late," she said, already taking his hand. "You're in my world tonight." She led him to the center of the ballroom. The music shifted from classical to something slower, richer. Naomi placed his hand on her waist, guiding his other to her shoulder. He followed her lead, stiff at first, then slowly loosening as they moved. "Do you always get your way?" he asked. "Only when it matters." "What about when it doesn't?" "Then I choose who gets theirs." He raised an eyebrow. "And tonight?" She looked up at him. "Tonight, I want yours." They danced in slow circles beneath the crystal lights. Around them, the city gleamed through floor to ceiling windows, a million lives unfolding in miniature. "You know," he said after a beat, "I've never been in a room like this." She rested her head lightly against his chest. "And I've never danced with someone who made me forget everyone else was here." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Later, as the speeches began and the crowd turned toward the stage, Naomi stepped up to the mic. Her voice was calm, but there was something in it Emery hadn't heard before, not just polish, but conviction. "We talk about change like it's a formula," she said. "Donations, deadlines, data, but real change doesn't come from balance sheets. It comes from people. From men who fix broken pipes in houses they'll never live in. from little girls who remind us the world is still worth building. She glanced toward Emery and Sadie, her gaze steady. I used to think leadership meant standing above the crowd, but lately, I've learned it means standing beside the right ones. The applause was warm, genuine. Emery didn't move, he couldn't. His heart felt too full, too exposed. Afterward, they stepped out onto the rooftop garden, the city stretching endlessly in every direction. Sadie had fallen asleep in a chair inside, watched over by Naomi's assistant. She wasn't talking about me, Emery said, staring out at the skyline. Yes, she was, Naomi said, joining him at the railing. You still want to hire me. I want more than that. He turned to her. I want you to build with me, she said. Not just walls and floors, a life, something that lasts. I know it's fast, but I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who want something from me. You're the first man who asked for nothing and gave everything anyway. I didn't plan on falling into this, he said. It wasn't supposed to be anything. Neither was finding Sawyer in the park, she said, but here we are. He reached out, brushing a thumb along her cheek. If we do this, it has to be real, no pretending, no press releases. No pretending, she echoed, just us. He leaned in, she met him halfway. The kiss was quiet, but it rooted something in place like the first beam laid on a foundation, strong and certain. 6 months later, the estate opened its doors. The upstairs therapy room was done in warm woods and soft blues, the table built by Emery's hands. Sadie ran barefoot through the wide halls, now filled with voices and laughter. Naomi stood beside him on the porch, a clipboard in one hand, her other laced through his. They owned no castles, but they had built something better. A home. And love, finally, without conditions. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the estate's newly renovated sunroom, the kind of steady drizzle that made everything feel slower, quieter. Inside, Emery was kneeling by the fireplace, stacking the last of the cut logs. His hands worked methodically, the warmth from the flames chasing away the spring chill that still lingered in the air. Naomi entered carrying a tray with 2 mugs of tea, setting it down on the small table near the armchairs. She wore a loose sweater and jeans, her hair still damp from the walk back from the garden. Without the layers of formality or the weight of the city, she looked content, at peace. Emery straightened and turned toward her, brushing his hands on his jeans. You didn't have to do all that. I wanted to, she said simply, handing him a mug. Besides, it's the first quiet morning we've had in weeks. He took a sip. The tea was rich and herbal, not something he would have picked for himself, but he didn't mind the taste. Quiet's good. I forgot what it sounds like. Naomi settled into the chair across from him, curling her legs beneath her. The last family moved in yesterday. That's 27 people under this roof now, and another group coming next week. He leaned back, letting the warmth soak into his shoulders. You ever think we'd get this far? No, she admitted. I thought I'd fund a few places, make them livable, and move on. I didn't think I'd stay. But you did. I didn't want to, she added, until I met you. He looked over at her, studying the way her eyes lingered on his face, steady and unguarded. I don't think I've ever asked, she said after a pause. Why did you say yes that day, when I offered you the first job? He exhaled slowly. Because no one had believed in me like that in a long time, not without asking for something back. Naomi's voice lowered. I wasn't sure if you'd say yes. I was scared you'd look at me and only see what everyone else sees. I did, he said, but I looked longer. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It carried something deeper now, something lived in. She pulled a folded piece of paper from the book beside her and handed it to him. This came today. It's from the city council. He unfolded it, scanned the contents, and blinked. They're approving the land. Naomi nodded. 6 acres on the edge of the city. They're giving us the green light for a second site. He let out a low whistle. That's big. It's also yours. Told them you'd be the lead on the project. He looked up sharply. Naomi. No press, no board oversight. Just you, your designs, your crew. I want this to be your legacy as much as mine. He folded the letter and set it on the table. Are you sure? I'm sure about everything, she said, including you. At that moment, Sadie ran into the room, cheeks flushed and hair flying. Come see what I made. Emery stood, setting his mug aside. What is it this time? A castle, she announced, with pillows and blankets, and it has a throne, but you can't sit on it unless you're married. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Sadie nodded. Only married people get to be king and queen, that's the rule. Naomi looked at Emery, her lips twitching. I don't make the rules. He crossed the room, scooped Sadie into his arms, and looked back at Naomi. Then maybe we should stop breaking them. Sadie gasped, You're gonna get married. Emery looked over at Naomi, his fingers tightening gently around his daughter. We already built everything else together. Might as well build that too. Naomi crossed the room, standing in front of them. You serious? He nodded. I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do, and I know it won't always be easy, but I'm not going anywhere. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him, soft and certain, while Sadie giggled between them. Then it's settled, Naomi whispered. You're mine. The wedding was small, held in the estate's courtyard under strings of lanterns, and surrounded by the families they'd welcomed into the home. Rihanna officiated, cracking a joke halfway through that made Naomi laugh so hard she had to wipe her eyes. Emery wore a navy suit that actually fit this time. Naomi's dress was simple, elegant, and perfect. Sadie wore a flower crown and insisted on holding both their hands during the vows. They didn't need extravagance. The magic was in the people, in the laughter that echoed through the courtyard, in the way Naomi leaned into Emery during their first dance, whispering something only he could hear. After the cake was cut and the last candle flickered out, they sat together on the steps of the estate, shoes off, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting on her knee. You ever think we'd end up here? He asked. I didn't even know this place existed until I met you. We're not done building, you know. I'm counting on it. They kissed again, not rushed or showy, but slow and full of everything they hadn't needed to say out loud. A few years later, the second site opened. This one had a garden, a playground, and a workshop named after Emery. Sadie ran the ribbon-cutting ceremony, now old enough to read her speech without help. Naomi and Emery stood together on the deck of the new building, watching kids chase each other across the grass, parents laughing on benches, the world a little softer than before. I think we did it, she said. We're still doing it. She slipped her hand into his. You still love me. More every day. And it was true. What they built wasn't just shelter or structure. It was family. It was safety. It was love. And it was forever.